I would like to welcome up onto the stage, but first I'll let you know our fireside chat, what it is entitled. This session is called Neuroplasticity in the Classroom, Leveraging Brain-Based Learning for Academic Success. So I'd like to welcome up our panelists. First we have Laurie Eglinton, CEO and founder of Ancient Science, and Teja Goodlaru, founder, Virtual Guru Online Learning. Let's put our hands together as we welcome them up onto the stage.
All right, looks like we can start. Hi, Laurie. Good to be here. I'm fabulous. Your mic, please.
How about now?
Yeah.
All right.
So I know this is post-lunch, and yesterday I heard some fabulous feedback about your talk, so I'm actually excited to be here.
Gratitude. Thank you.
And one of my favorite topics, and I know it's your favorite topic as well, neuroplasticity in the classroom. How can that enhance academic success? And I know, Laurie, you do quite a lot of work in this space. So just to start from the basics, right? What is neuroplasticity according to you? How would you define it to somebody who's never heard this term before?
Well, the first thing I would say is the neuroplasticity is absolutely our science of hope. 100%. So I hope my objective is to get you to walk away and to know that today and to start putting it into practice consciously. You're already using neuroplasticity every single day of your life. You have been since you got here. But to use it consciously and mindfully is what we want to do from our session today. So I'd like everyone to cross their arms right now. Now, cross them the other way. Who felt awkward doing that? Yeah, so that's neuroplasticity in action right there. So this is our brain and really our entire nervous system. You are one big brain. We got the cranial brain in the skull, right? But also the nervous system throughout the body. And it's the ability to rewire and adapt based on new experiences. These experiences could be thoughts, emotional responses, or actions and behaviors. So the brain is constantly creating these neural circuits. The neurons, we got 100 billion of these brain cells just in the cranial brain, come together and talk to each other in a way they haven't ever before. And really, the capacity for us to be able to do that is unlimited throughout the entire lifespan. This never goes away, the plasticity that we have.
I really love that little activity there because I'll probably have to demonstrate this, right? Somebody told me this a while ago. So I went to a conference. I was randomly standing somewhere listening to something. Somebody came up to me and said, "Did you have childhood trauma?" I'm like, "Who the hell are you? And how did you figure that out?" Right?
How did you know?
Yeah. So apparently, here's how I was standing, right? I noticed most of them here, the moment you said cross your arms, they did this.
Right.
I went this. And they said, "What are you afraid of opening up to an audience because you're hiding your hands?" What's the significance of that? What do you make out of it? How did that person figure that out?
So how did you feel
When
you were crossing your arms that way? What's the feeling?
felt safe though, not showing my hands, probably. I never thought about it. It was more natural.
So Teja has a circuit that has been developed over many years since lifetime. There's a motion that's attached with this. a lack of confidence. I can't completely reveal who I am, right? I might not be accepted. And of course, as mammals, the most important thing we have to do as humans is to be able to navigate social and be accepted, because we're an interconnected species and we need each other, right? So not being accepted to the nervous system is death. So that was very emotional for him. And he's been doing a little bit of hiding over the years, not completely revealing himself. And that has actually formed a map, a brain map, a neural circuit, a pathway. Think about it like this. Think about a forest. And for Teja's brain, if you think about it like a forest, right? He has pathways, and that's one of them, that have been walked over and over and over again. And think about walked as being attended to or observed by thinking, emotionally responding, or behaving. And those pathways have been formed and formed and formed. But there are unlimited pathways in the forest. You can absolutely create your own forest, and I recommend that you be your own gardener. Otherwise, the external world will, and that might not be the garden and the pathway that you want, right? So if he wanted to create a new pathway, which he is, I want you to talk a little bit about that, to create a new pathway, he actually has to get a little bit uncomfortable because there's no brain map, there's no circuit for that. So he has to carve out a new pathway. Now let's think about that. If you were going through the forest and you had to carve out a new pathway, you've got to cut down those trees and bushes and the grass is high. It's going to be a little bit of work at first. That the more you repeat going down that pathway, guess what the forest does to the non-confidence or insecure pathway? It reclaims it. So 2 rules in neuroplasticity. Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Neurons that fire apart, wire apart.
I love the analogy. In fact, reminds me of how, so primarily this comes from the fact that to the most part of my life, I still am, but I was completely an introvert. Now I'm probably an extroverted introvert. But that acknowledgement of somebody to say, hey, it's that evident that we can make out that something about you is not confident enough. So I went back, and in those days you had these bulky handy cams that you could buy. Of course, now we have the phones. So Best Buy US, I went picked up a camera when I was visiting, put it in the hotel, started recording myself. And I figured out that the image that I was seeing in the recorded video is not the image I wanted people to see, right? And that triggered me to practice a little bit. And I love the way you said repeat, repeat, repeat. Because every day, almost like a disciplined chore that I was doing, I would practice for about 10, 15 minutes just to stand up. Just to stand up and have the right posture and eventually start speaking. And today, I'm probably a lot more comfortable talking to a large group like this. So I'm curious, just to pick your brains on something, right? How is this relevant to educators? Why is this relevant? Because this seems more driven by, at least in my experience, I still had to do the work, right? So how is it important for an educator to be aware of neuroplasticity in a classroom? Yeah. And how could it help?
So it's the foundation for all learning. And so what Teja described is that he actually consciously engaged in neurosculpting. We're all neurosculpting every day. Are you consciously aware of how you're sculpting and crafting your own brain? Most of us aren't. And so this is what this leads to one of the most powerful tools, is to be able to direct your attention and your focus in alignment with your highest self and your goals, right? Your highest goals. That's actually a form of mindfulness and self-observation, which were 2, self-awareness, self-observation, and mindfulness that he was engaging in. So what does this have to do with the classroom? So a teacher is holding a space for human development. Every single thing that is going on, every moment of our lives, it doesn't matter where your classroom is. This is a classroom right here. Life is a classroom. Every one of you, if you're paying attention in any way, are sparking a new neuron, or you're growing your brain map around the concept of neuroplasticity, right? So to know that we're sculpting each other's brains in the context of social as well, right? Social interaction. So the teachers' brain maps are actually contagious. Just like we can share trauma, for example. Trauma maps are contagious, but also any type of map about learning a concept or an idea or an attitude or a way to approach things is contagious. Approach things is contagious as well. So if a teacher knows this, he or she is going to be more mindful about what they're modeling, what they're saying, and really in particularly where they are directing the learner's attention. What changes the brain? Attention. Wherever attention is focused. Whatever you practice grows. Wherever attention goes, that's where energy flows, and that is absolutely what grows. If you want to quit smoking and you put your attention on quit smoking, you're going to grow your neural circuit for smoking. What do you put your attention on? Where you want to go. Like rehearsing your own future.
It's fascinating you say that because, I know we were talking about this since yesterday. Somebody asked Usain Bolt, I'm sure everybody knows Usain Bolt, the fastest man on earth. He said, how do you do this, man? Game up, race after race after race. How do you do this? And he said, I visualize my run. If my race is tomorrow, a day before, I'm actually sitting down, I'm visualizing exactly how I'm going to be running that 100 meters. Not just that, also look at all my opponents who are in the race. I'm visualizing them too, their style of running too. And somebody said, come on, that's bullshit. How can that help? Now that you're famous, you're just giving us a story. So for a lot of money, he let them hook him up to a lot of plug. Study me. So when they did that, it's televised. I think YouTube people can refer to that. Interestingly, when he started visualizing stuff, the muscles that were getting activated were exactly the same muscles that would otherwise get activated when he would run an actual race. Man U does the same thing. Manchester United, they're together as a team with the coach. They actually sit down before the game and they visualize. Of course, sometimes when they fail, you may want to wonder, does that work? But the fact is that they all visualize. Is that somewhere related directly to creating those neural pathways before the game? What do you think?
Absolutely, Teja. That is a beautiful example of how somebody is consciously and mindfully directing their own neuroplasticity. And there's a term called self-directed neuroplasticity. And really, that's what all neuroplasticity is. It really is self-directed neuroplasticity. It's just, are you consciously doing it or not? And so when you engage in a practice, which I highly recommend bringing into a learning space, such as visualization, you're lighting up so many different networks of the brain, right? By visualizing it, you're in feeling it emotionally, really getting into it. That's actually key, is to feel it when you see it, right? The brain is firing. The more pathways that are firing, the greater that map is going to be, that circuit or that brain pathway, right? So that's what he was doing. And the research actually shows, the literature shows that practicing the future, rehearsing, it actually can be more powerful than even doing it itself. And it's clear that we could just visualize something. And there was a study at Stanford where they had folks practice the piano for 5 hours a day for 2 weeks, and or 2 hours a day for 5 days. I think that's what it was. And they scanned their brains before and after. And just in that short period of time, of course, the areas and the regions in the brain associated with the more motor movements grew like weeds in an abandoned garden. And then they said, what happens if they just visualize? They just practice in their mind. Same thing. Same thing. We can even sit still and never move a muscle and visualize doing a bicep curl, and we will grow muscle tissue. This is throughout the whole mind-brain-body network. You are plastic. You are the designer of your future. And whatever maps you create, you see the world through the lens of those circuits. So kind of that law of attraction, right? There's actually some science to that. Whatever maps you have, you're going to view interactions, people, places, and things through that lens.
The reason why I'm smiling is now I feel guilty for firing my personal instructor because I don't go to the gym. You can see this, but I think day 2 or day 3, this fellow started telling me, talk to your body, right? That's what will make you build muscle. I said, this is bogus, man. I paid a lot of money to this guy to help me build a muscle, and this guy's telling talk to your body. I could do that at home, so I actually quit. So that makes sense. So again, talking to yourself is that repetition that you're talking about, that neural pathways that you're trying to self-create, so that your brain's a lot more eased into providing those energies, you say. Now, one of the other terms that I heard you talk about yesterday, or maybe today before the session, is around movement itself, right? And now you just said sometimes you could just sit down and still build neural pathways, but you also speak of movement. Is that a contradiction, or are they complementing each other? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, beautiful question. I think what we need to know is there's just multiple avenues and pathways for getting those neurons, those brain cells, to talk to each other in new ways, or to continue to talk to each other, or to prune away old circuits that no longer serve you. So a good example, I'm a yogi. And so just when I'm struggling, if I'm having some type of mental or emotional challenge, I will get on my mat and I will move through it. And I have absolutely broke down in tears on my mat because I accessed pathways in my body that were outdated. They needed upgrading. They no longer served me, right? And having a trauma. Now, we've all had trauma, right? But I definitely have a pretty intense trauma narrative. I've spent my whole life just rewiring my nervous system. And I've done it through movement on the mat, and yoga has been the most effective way for me to do it. But visualization is another way. Anytime you make things emotionally sticky, and emotions reside in the body at the cellular level. See, our issues are in our tissues, right? Which is why I take kind of a neurosomatic approach to transformation, healing, and growth. So you can use lots of ways to get those neurons to talk to each other. Another example is storytelling, and you're a beautiful storyteller. And think about this is what our ancients did for years. Our ancestors hung out by the fire pit and told stories, and that's how we learned, right? Neuroplasticity is old. We just have the modern science to show how we have become the humans that we are. Now we can direct our attention in unique ways to create the circuits that we want that then show up in the outer world, because the world without is absolutely 100% a reflection of the world within.
It's interesting you say that, because if you look at most of our cultures, religions, they all existed even before humankind could write, print stuff. And I think the only way cultures, cults, propagated and survived over the years is storytelling. In fact, somebody was telling me once the possibility, and now that we are in Dubai, the possibility is endless, even in our stories. But somewhere they had to put control, like the Aladdin and the genie. They always told us, you're granted 3 wishes. But apparently in the original story, there was no number. You could pretty much ask as many wishes as you could. But somewhere down that storytelling, somebody said, you know what? How do I make them choose or make the right choices? The only way that can happen is if I restrict that number to 3. And suddenly now I have to choose the top 3 desires I have. And that's how they so we call this anchoring in neuro-linguistic programming. Do you think it works even for neuroplasticity, where you're either role modeling a certain behavior or assigning a term that can be repetitively, like we say check in, just to check on each other, right? Check in, like the airline check in. So we now tell a lot of senior leaders in organizations, do a check in with your team. What that really means is, do you go check on their well-being? Now that's a term that sticks. What's the connection to neuroplasticity, role modeling, and terms like this, according to you?
Well, the shared maps, right? So when we watch something, and we learned this from some work in Italy, mirror neurons. Maybe who's heard of mirror neurons? Some of you, we have these brain cells that whenever we watch somebody do something, our brain will fire in the same way as their brains do. So when we're watching somebody do a behavior, if I watch you do something, I will fire in that way. So take-home message is, pay attention to who you're hanging out with, right? And what you're watching, right? So that's how modeling works. It's firing those mirror neurons, and then we're actually growing those maps and circuits ourselves. But also, I want to go back to something that I directed your attention to earlier, and that is paying attention to where you are putting your attention. As Dr. Amishi Jha, a neuroscientist from the University of Miami, says, wherever you put your attention, that is your life. So already you're learning in a classroom as a learning facilitator. You want to be able to direct the learner's attention to what it is that you want them to grow more of. So if there's a problem behavior in the classroom, if you direct your attention on that problem behavior, chances are you're going to grow it. Because wherever attention goes, that's where energy flows, and that's what grows. Right? That's so key right there. If you can learn how to consciously and mindfully direct your attention in alignment with what you really want, the sky is absolutely the limit. We got a lot of things pulling on attention, so to hold a learning space where you're directing attention is the most important thing that you can do. And direct it mindfully and consciously. And of course, we've already talked about visualization, putting that in the classroom, making things emotionally sticky. And I want to go back to the hanging around the fire pit and sharing stories and parables and how that grew our brain maps, right? So it's evening time. We're telling stories and parables. Everybody's learning from these. They're growing their neural circuits, right? It's emotional. We're making it emotional. Why do we love movies and stories, right? And then what happens? What does everybody do afterwards? They go to bed. Key ingredient in neuroplastic changes, rest. You need rest and you need spacing. If you wanted to do really well on some type of a performance or activity or a test or something, study in the evening before you go to bed and then go to sleep. And that's when the consolidation is going to take place for you. And you will hold on to what was most emotionally salient for you, what's most important for you. So rest is really critical. And then spacing. So that might look in a classroom like you learn a concept or a tool and then you step away from it. And the mind wanders, right? The mind takes off. And that's when some neuroplasticity happens as well. Another place is mistakes. That's actually a key ingredient for neuroplasticity. So what happens to the brain when you make a mistake? You have to redirect it. The brain says, whoa, that didn't work. I need a new pathway. So one of the things that you can do in a classroom as a learning facilitator is you can highlight mistakes and make them fun and make them cool. But the key is they got to talk about what they learned from it because that's what they want to grow. So even doing something like I've had teachers make a mistake journal or a mistake board, and then the kids will share where they made an error, what they learned from it. Growth mindset, another key ingredient that connects to neuroplasticity. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there.
I'm looking at you because I'm wondering, this is exactly what I do with adults in corporates, in when I go to companies, teaching them stuff, coaching them on stuff. This is exactly what you're telling them. So I guess the formula, if I can call it that way, is the same whether you're a kid, you're an adult, right? But here's where I've always found this to be a gray area. When does it stop being about neuroplasticity and just be a habit? Because what you're saying, it seems to me, is defining habits that one can have, the discipline one can have. Is that the same as neuroplasticity, or am I getting this all jumbled up? What are your
you're
thoughts?
right on track. Habits, you could look at habits as skills. So you can have a skill of being joyful and happy every day. Or you could have the skill of being bitter and resentful and angry. They're both habits and skills. It's just which one do you want to cultivate? Neuroplasticity, it doesn't discriminate. It's just wherever the attention goes. And that is how we create those habits. So every time, so the check-in that he talked about, That's a point of observation or attention. So every time there's another observation, attention, thought, feeling, anything and sensation, anything put on where you want to go, it's going to grow it. So you want to constantly be redirecting your attention or the learner's attention to what it is that they want to cultivate, right? They're all skills, they're all habits.
So all this, again, since it comes back to habit, since it comes back to discipline, isn't it therefore driven by every individual learner? Or is it something that collectively we can drive in terms of being educators or facilitators of learning? Because person A may be more self-aware and therefore be more aware of where they put the attention. Like you say, we call this the red Ferrari syndrome. Otherwise, if you like a red Ferrari car, wherever you go, you'll see a red car, right? But is that specific to people? Is that natural for everyone? Because I find it difficult to believe that everybody is equally self-aware. So how do we therefore drive somebody to pick up on some of these behaviors that enhances neuroplasticity? Because like between us, you seem a lot more knowledgeable about neuroplasticity than perhaps where I am today, but I'm probably more self-aware than you. I'm just giving you an example, right? So how do we both, if somebody were to drive us in a classroom, both of us being learners and some other person trying to teach us something, how can they drive the habit of neuroplasticity for the both of us equally? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, beautiful question. So attach it to a map they already have. Okay? So use them. Metaphors, for example. What did I do when I talked about everybody in here has a neural circuit for a forest. And I used it. I used it to help you understand neuroplasticity better. So I relied on a map. And metaphors increase learning by up to almost 50%. Just like visual aids also do as well. Pictures, those types of things. So using something that's already embedded. So let's think about that with a child or an adult, doesn't matter, in a classroom. You've got one kid or person who plays the piano, and you've got another one who plays football. So which metaphor are you going to use? What map are you going to attach to? So you start talking about, spelling or math or whatever the new learning concept is in the context of football. So you might use the language of you're building this muscle, right? Or have them talk about what do you do as the quarterback, and then link the learning to that. Same thing the person who plays the piano, link it to a map that's already established. So I had a kid that skied. So I was in private practice, a psychotherapist many years ago. I had a kid who skied, and math was taking him over the edge. He was failing, totally stumping his self-esteem. So we just talked about, I did some hypnosis with him, and we did some visualization. And I had him actually imagine that he was skiing math. And he was able to apply what he knew about being so good at skiing to his learning for math. And he went from an F to a D. Yeah.
And that's growth. And that reminds me of our conversation. Dr. Omar is here as well. We were talking about people with terminal illnesses or disabilities in learning sometimes. There are kids who have learning disabilities. How does this concept become any different for them, or is it still the same?
I mean, it's really still the same. There's plasticity regardless of whether there's a learning disability. I mean, we all really have learning disabilities, in some form or another. I think it's all on a spectrum, really. Some of us are able to hide them or cover them up just a little bit more than others, right? Yeah, absolutely. Let's all humble ourselves just a little bit. So it's the same, but you're going to be attuning to that use and paying attention to what's going to be emotionally sticky for them. That's really important because then that's going to help to grow those maps in their brains. And obviously you can use things like phonics. Those have been used with learning disabilities, in a classroom and things like that as well. And using multiple modalities. One of the things we want to be careful with is to assume that somebody's a visual or they learn, through sound. We actually learn through all of those. So max them all out. Use all of them. Fire up that brain. Does anybody see the movie Limitless or Lucy? Right? We want to fire as many networks as possible. And it doesn't matter whether there's a learning disability or not. We know from work from stroke victims that the brain, pathways in the brain will be created that take over pathways that have been damaged. So Norman Doidge's work, The Brain That Changes Itself, there's probably one of the best books on neuroplasticity. A girl born with the left hemisphere missing. You wouldn't think she'd be able to function, right? Probably got a few, what we call learning disabilities. Her brain, the right brain, there was plenty of potential connections in there to take over most of the duties of the left brain. So she's got a half a hemisphere and she's doing pretty darn good.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know we have a couple of minutes left for the discussion before we open up for some questions. The topic of this conference seems to be AI, right? So with artificial intelligence being the buzzword, and it's probably going to be the buzzword for a few years to come, how does that impact neuroplasticity, or is it enhancing it? Because it seems to me most of what you're saying is personal actions. It's all here in the brain. So is AI a threat to neuroplasticity, or can it empower facilitators, learners, educators to use AI to perhaps even better neuroplasticity in the classroom? What are your thoughts on that?
We didn't plan for these questions.
Oh, this is impromptu, by the way. We
It
hardly
totally
prepared.
is improv.
Yeah.
Even just your neural map and our individual and collective neural maps, because we really are one big global brain, right? Even the map that we have around AI is going to dictate how well it goes. So when I have everybody think about AI right now, what else do you think about? Pay attention to what comes up for you, because brain maps don't exist in isolation. There are implicit below conscious awareness connections to that map, right? And so whatever that map, this is bad, or we're losing our connection in humanity and all of these other things, if that's your map, that's going to influence the global map and dictate where we go. So what we want to do is we want to see and create AI the way that we want to see it go in the future. We've always got to be directing our attention on how we want this to go. So I think that how we see it and visualize it is going to be really important.
I love that, because even yesterday in one of the panels, I think somebody said, if you're able to use AI to take care of your transactional administrative stuff, then you have more time for yourself to be more self-aware. And when you're more self-aware, you're visualizing better, you have better mental space to perhaps create. So I think I really like the way you said, visualize what you want from your AI. Therefore, it should not replace your brain activity, rather it should find more space and time for you, because kids today perhaps have 5 seconds attention spans is what I'm told. So
Adults, 3.
Adults too, 3, yeah. So fabulous, thank you. I think, like you said, we didn't plan for most of these questions. I was glad I got this opportunity to kind of talk to you about this. Laurie, thank you.
Thank you, Taisha. Really
As
appreciate
always,
it.
pleasure
Yeah,
listening to
wonderful.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry. Thank you. This is also impromptu, like you
Totally.
see. Our neural networks aren't connected yet. But thank you, everyone, for being patient. I know it's a post-lunch session. We've tried to keep it as engaging as we could. Any questions that you have for Laurie or I, more than happy to answer that before we call this a ends. Lawrence, Professor Lawrence. Somebody. Oh, is there a mic? Okay. Thank you. Can someone help with the mic?
I'm not familiar with the effects. I'm just familiar with it. You said somatic yoga. But what? We could. Yeah.
Okay.
Wanted to learn this technique, and I've always been. I was quite learning it without actually. So he came and he taught us the 6 week. There was about 50 people in the group, and I remember after the first session, walking out with a guy called Mohammed, and we were just walking out of the room, and I said, "What's happening?" I said, "I feel like I'm walking." He said, "Me the same," and he said, "We're walking like we were kind of just loping along. It was so cool." And we had very strange things happen in that. I remember on the third or fourth session, we had a big mirror in front of us because it was actually a ballet class room. And the lady at the front, on the relaxation bit, when we were all standing, she burst into tears. And we said, "What on earth's going on with you?" She said, "Well, look at my hands." And she had her hands next to her. And one of the hands was about 2 inches lower than the other. She said, "That was a car accident, and I've not been able to do this for 17 years. But 3 sessions of Hannah somatics, and she could do it. And it became something we could play with. So, for example, I learned to wiggle both ears or one or the other by forming a new neural pathway. And actually, if you know what you're doing and you practice it, it can take minutes to form a new neural pathway. So I thought that, particularly related to what you were saying as an educator, that was so interesting what you were saying. And I just want to say thank you because I learned a lot.
Well, and you just taught us as well.
Well, yeah, apparently.
In fact, I have a question for the audience. From what you've just noticed, how many of you could connect to him as he was speaking? You know why that happened? That's the movement that she was talking about. The entire enacting, right, creates those connections because a lot of people could connect with him. But otherwise, I've come to become a fan of your talks. I was here yesterday as well and loved what you said.
Okay, I come cheap. You can...
Well, I do have a question though for everybody.
There's one.
Let's take it to practical application. What tool that you learned today that he just used that facilitates neuroplastic changes? He just did it. Yes, just like that. And that's why we got captivated.
For
Storytelling.
There was one other thing.
There's more.
There's one other thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
You said sleep on it. Talk, sleep, learn, sleep. In all of the training I do all over Saudi or Dubai or Oman or wherever, whatever I do, I always put this into the curriculum. It's never called for, but I do it.
Beautiful.
And that is divergent, convergent brainstorming.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So make them write a problem statement. They write a problem statement. They discuss it. They brainstorm it. 20 minutes of spewing out ideas, and then don't look at it again. Sleep on it. I don't know if you heard of this. And come back in the morning and look at it, and there it is. There's your answer, highlighted. Because while you've been sleeping, your brain has been prioritizing those solutions and putting them in priority order. It works amazingly well.
We have incredible inner soft technology. We're just now figuring out how to use it. But neuroplasticity is such an example of what's inside of us, right? And we can direct those pathways consciously and mindfully, which is why, meditation, mindfulness practice is also a key ingredient in a classroom as well, so that learners learn how to put intention around where they're directing their attention.
One of my mentors, in fact, told me this once. every time you're doing something, he said, listen to the voice between your ears. If it is positive, you're good. If it's negative, time to focus the attention back on you, not the problem. And I think now that I talk to you, it's in a way trying to train your brain to be more positive, have those reinforcements more positively. So I think it's brilliant what our brain can do. And I mean, to think of it, we only figured out about 7-8% of our brain yet as humans. So thank you. Thank you for that. So,
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, this one is for Laurie. So I'm into professional capability building for last 22 years. So one of the key, word which is happening is growth mindset. Yeah. So I just want to understand, especially for adults, what all top 3 techniques you would like to recommend to adults to improve their growth mindset. Yeah.
Really, just look at any setback as a way to upgrade. Every single setback is an opportunity for growth. I mean, that's the key ingredient, and one of the key ingredients. The second one, this is probably the most that we see in the literature on growth mindset, is persistence in the face of challenge. So you want to cultivate a brain map for that. Really, you want a big, fat, relentless neural pathway. You do not stop. That is key ingredient in growth mindset. So if you're working with a team, if you're working with a group, with even as a parent with your children, teach them you continue and you don't stop. You persist in the face of every single challenge. And then the performance is superior. Because growth mindset says that we can learn at any time and cultivate any skill, any capacity at some level with effort, commitment, and dedication, and in the face of even challenges.
So personally for me, I think we've been overdoing and over-abusing this term growth mindset, is my honest opinion on this. Because humans are born with growth mindset. It's like this, right? We all are born swimmers. Every mammal on planet Earth swims by birth. But because you don't nurture that, like look at what happens to our kids. When you have to teach them swimming 5 years later, it takes that much more effort to teach them something that they are born with, right? You put a newborn baby into water, they will float, right? But it's our conditioning as parents sometimes that we are scared to put our child into the water, so we stop that from happening. And 5 years later, it takes that much more effort. So to answer the question, for me, it's very simple. I look at habits like what Laurie was talking about. For me, if you can, I don't know if you watch tennis or cricket here, they always say good players seem to have that 5 seconds extra. Like if you look at Roger Federer, his backhand, it seems like he has that extra time than the other players. For me, growth mindset is to have that pause, that extra 30 seconds if you're able to create as humans. You don't need mentors, you don't need coaches. Your brain has all the answers. So the way I do it is I always ask myself one question, and that is, what's my bigger battle in this scenario? So if I have a bad boss, if I have bad traffic or that flight got delayed, what's my bigger battle? Is it to go and figure out the next available flight or to go fight with the next airline employee that I can see? The moment I'm able to pause myself and ask that question, what's my bigger battle? I usually know the right answer. I don't need anybody else to tell me. So for me, sir, that simple habit is that 30-second space that I make for myself. Sorry, you've been waiting for a while.
That's okay. Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Walaikum
I had a
salam.
quick question. My name is Elizabeth. I'm an academic director based in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And I'm doing a lot of work currently with, I know we've been talking about students, right? But shifting to educators and working with them on both technical and adaptive skill set shifts, and recognizing that immunity to change that we all have to certain things, and that muscle memory and the path that is familiar is the one we go down the most. But do you think that, I guess my question is, do you think that adults have the capability, they do, but do they have the capability to actually engage in rewiring with things that they have such a barrier for, like beliefs and core values and ways students should be educated, or things that are comfortable for them? And if so, how do we start to rebuild that? How do we start to tap into that adaptive skill set shift and change the muscle memory that adults have. Is that
So,
clear?
so for me, since I work with a lot of adults, not as much with kids, the way I've gotten to understand this, ma'am, is the difference between consequence management and aspiration management. Unfortunately, most of us are driven by consequence management. I come from India, and in India, if you actually see, we have a lot of people on the roads, and traffic is a bit of a problem for us. But the laws exist. You know, we are expected to follow lanes. We're expected to wear helmets for safety, but not many seem to follow that as diligently as it is otherwise expected to. So I was talking to somebody about this in the government, and they said, well, we put out boards saying, if you don't wear a seat belt, you know, we'll charge you 10,000 rupees fine. And one of the police departments in one of our states, there's a place called Prayagraj, they tried something very differently last year, a few years ago. They started putting up signs like, go slow, there's somebody waiting for you at home. That year, they saw 36% lesser traffic violations. Aspiration management versus consequence management. And I think in schools, in offices, wherever we go, we are driven, we are controlled, we are managed by consequences. Try shifting that to aspirations. Don't talk to somebody saying, if you don't do this, you won't get a promotion. Talk about personal growth, right? The image that they would want others to see of them, that's aspiration. So I think that's my take.
And I would just say, well, thank you, it was a beautiful question. Who's heard you can't teach an old dog new tricks? It's the outdated dogma that we're up against. So be the pioneers that bust that, because that is so scientifically not validated. You can teach any dog a new trick at any time in their life. Plasticity is a lifetime. We got 2 critical periods of plasticity, right around 2, and then in the adolescent years. So pay attention to where your teenagers are putting their attention, because that's what they're going to turn into. But we've got plasticity through the whole lifetime. So if you use the tools that we've been talking about, right, it can really, like, making this emotional. The only other thing I would add to that is vulnerability and psychological safety for adults. They need to know that it's okay to be vulnerable in that space, so they need a lot of psychological safety to be able to do that. So being vulnerable with them, you know, showing where you've fallen on your face, right, and you're human too, is going to help cultivate that trust and that psychological safety for them to be able to explore and activate the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system so that they can actually learn. Otherwise, they're going to be in a mild state of fight or flight and not be able to learn. Hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome.
Thank you for that, Tori.
Dr. Omar.
My name is Dr. Omar Musa. I'm a clinical researcher at Harvard in Boston, and I did surgery, reconstructive surgery, for a while in Amsterdam before. I had a couple of notes and some comments on the beautiful discussion we just had. All your thoughts, everything completely resonates with what we're also doing in the clinic for reconstructive patients. What are reconstructive patients? Reconstructive patients are people that had an accident, had an oncologic resection. That means they had cancer. They went through a lot of psychosocial burden mentally, where eventually they come to a place where they also have in surgery a lot of insecurity about their treatment and prognosis, and eventually also come to a place where they want to see it as a safe haven for us doctors to take care of them. This goes along with a lot of education and a lot of things that we just spoken of that we can also see in a more pragmatic kind of integration there. What we try to see, and that absolutely aligns with everything you just said, were 2 techniques. The first one was Tejas just described technique, where we try to teach them that every time they would fail, for instance, by walking after the surgery or by mentally breaking again because they had an accident and they just get through like their reconstructive treatment, that every time they get back on their feet, it's not seen as a failure, but is seen as a repetition. Just like yourself training in a gym, doing physical repetitions, we can also do mental repetitions.
Yes, yes.
And that is one of the key factors that they should learn and know, that every time they get back is actually making them stronger, neuroplasticity, getting them in the right direction again. And then on another note, what you beautifully described, Laurie, was the thing that AI can do for us in these days. What AI can do is exactly also something that you just described with the skiing pupil that actually goes in a translation for math, where you go in like his world or her world to teach them something from their perspective. I think teachers do that a lot, getting a different perspective from the other one in opposite of you, being more empathic, seeing it from their perspective, and translating your communication back from what you want to say and giving special attention of how they interpret it from their side. And that is a key thing where AI is the biggest and best example, because we are biased. We as teachers see everything, and as humans see everything from our own perspective. But when you ask something like that, which is pretty weird to ask someone, if you would ask a friend, how can I align skiing with math? AI can give you a lot of different possibilities in which you can do. And then you can even ask, make me an image of what you just described. And then you can see slopes, making formulas, something that's not real or possible, and like all the images that we see on Google, but AI and generative kind of language model can do. So please, if you're stuck, if there's anything, I'm always happy to help, but I think AI is also a great resource we should tap into. Thank you all for your hard work, and thank you for the beautiful discussion.
Beautiful, Dr. Omar. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Omar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.